really frustrated by the almost epidemic that we're facing, that there's so many high protein options out there that really aren't high protein. Like Trek bars frustrate me. There's about 9 grams of protein in a Trek bar for about 250 calories or whatever it is. And they don't taste great. They taste like cardboard. That's my genuine opinion on Trek bars. They taste like cardboard. Same thing as like high protein wraps. There is 2 grams of protein difference in Lidl between the normal wraps and the high protein wraps, and you get 2 less wraps in the high protein wraps, which makes absolutely no sense.
That's terrible, man. That's terrible. Look, we should normalize looking at the food label.
Oh yes.
People don't look at the food label. I'm like, how are you supposed to know what's in there if you just justify based on the front of the packet? Like, look at the food label.
Welcome back to the Performwell Podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're looking for performance and wellness optimization so that you can not only smash your career, but also have a better life, better relationships, and better health. We believe that performance and wellness are yin and yang and work together. So listen in as we dive into topics that are going to help you optimize your life for the better.
What can go wrong if you don't track your macros?
Well, interestingly, right, if your goal is to lose fat, gain muscle, whatever, and you don't track your macros, then you could not get your goals.
It's pretty true. It's pretty true.
Basically.
It is. I mean, it is true. From a tracking standpoint and on having the knowledge on the macros that you're having, it really helps to see a visual picture of exactly where you are and what you're eating. With yourself over the years of experience you've had, Nick, what is kind of one big area that you've struggled with when it comes to tracking your macros?
I think, look, the biggest macro that I think everyone struggles with, and I've struggled with, is protein. Like carbs, fats, and protein. Carbs and fats are so easy to get in your diet. Like, even if we're looking at our financial standpoint, when you go to the shop, the number one cheapest thing that you can get is normally low in protein. Like, you think about the price of protein in shops, it is just hard to justify buying a meal that is obviously higher in protein that costs 2 to 3 times more than just buying a sandwich or a food item that isn't high in protein. And I think we're stuck by this convenience with having such low protein foods out there that it's hard to get it in. Obviously, that's changing a little bit in the recent times, but it's still a problem I find.
I think places like Lidl are starting to integrate it a little bit more, but I do argue that I'm really frustrated by the almost epidemic that we're facing, that there's so many high protein options out there that really aren't high protein. Like Trek bars frustrate me. There's about 9 grams of protein in a Trek bar for about 250 calories or whatever it is. And they don't taste great. They taste like cardboard. That's my genuine opinion on Trek bars. They taste like cardboard. Same thing as like high protein wraps. There is 2 grams of protein difference in Lidl between the normal wraps and the high protein wraps, and you get 2 less wraps in the high protein wraps, which makes absolutely no sense.
That's terrible, man. That's terrible. I mean, I know what you mean. Like, the word high protein is thrown around a lot, and then, but look, we should normalize looking at the food label.
Oh yes.
People don't look at the food label. I'm like, how are you supposed to know what's in there if you just justify based on the front of the packet? Like, look at the food label.
It is interesting you say that, because someone questioned that on my 50 grams videos, and they turned around and said, well, why are you telling people this? They can just read the food label. I'm like, because 150,000 people aren't doing that. So I'm doing it for them, and I'm making content on it. And it's really interesting because it's such a simple thing to learn how to do, but we don't do it because actually standing in the supermarket, I get this feeling sometimes when I do it. When you turn around the packaging, you almost feel like everyone's staring at the back of your head. Like, why are they looking at the nutritional information? Why are they flipping that round? Why aren't they just buying the food they want? It's like this psychological thing that plays ball with us. And I find that so intriguing that there is that kind of level of curiosity around it. But let's backtrack onto what we're going to talk about, onto the macro side of it. Because again, we want to talk about protein. And actually, I'm going to give you a bit of insight later down the line into the actual amount of protein you need to be getting per day, because it's not what you think it is. Don't worry, I'm not telling everyone to consume 400 grams of protein or whatever other people prescribe. When we're trying to go to a basic standpoint, so let's talk through this process. The first thing we need to do is calculate our macros. So when we're calculating our macros, we normally derive that from our calorie calculation number. Percentage-wise, what would be the kind of standards that we'd see in the industry for people prescribing protein, carbs, and fats to people?
But do you know what? I don't go by percentages because my calorie requirements are so much higher than the average person that I deal with, that if I was to go by percentage, my protein would be over 240 grams a day, which I think is ridiculous. So I don't go by percentages. However, for the average person, like if we're talking anyone between 5'6" and 11, if that's average, I don't know. Then obviously you could probably apply that. I go by grammages. Obviously, for the protein is the most important thing I first calculate, and that is 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. I tend to side towards the 0.7 because I've actually, read up a lot about it, tested it myself. But you don't need super high protein, but you also don't need super low. You need in the middle, moderate amount of protein. So 0.7 works perfectly for me, right? But if you are on the lighter side, like let's say you're 60 kilos and you want to get your protein in, then maybe go a little bit higher. But it's important to have context with your percentages.
Well, that rolls me in really quickly. Actually, I just want to interject very quickly. It rolls me in very quickly to what I was just mentioning about with people over-prescribing protein to themselves, because we've seen for years it's like, I don't know, it's like 2.2 grams per kilogram, which is what would be like 4.8, which is a lot. It's a hell of a lot of protein for what you're consuming at that point in time. So we regress that. Like when you look at a graph, and there's one really good study that basically showed the protein intake over a period of time and the increased lean muscle mass, and it showed there's a point of limiting returns at 1.5 grams per kilos of body mass. So actually, in relativity, you only need 1.5 times your body weight. So if you weigh 100 kilos, you need 150 grams of protein realistically to see the greatest benefit. You can continue past that, you'll still see benefits, but then you're also thinking, I need to now consume an extra 100 grams of protein.
Also, if you're cutting, generally protein you want to have it a little bit higher, or at least percentage-wise have it a little bit higher, because obviously your body will tap into a little bit of that for glucogenesis purposes, use it for energy production, which is probably one of the worst macronutrient for energy production. So you don't want that. So that's why you don't want to have too much fucking protein. But yeah, that being said, cutting percentage tends to be higher, but bulking it tends to be lower. So the heavier weight you are, generally the percentage is going to change. That's why I don't focus on percentage myself. I don't like MyFitnessPal, the little thing that you scroll down saying, 100%, etc. Don't even think about it. As long as you're getting in roughly 0.7 per pound, I don't know the kilo.
1.5 kilos.
I don't know the kilo version. I don't do that one.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know why I switched to pounds, because kilos is something that we use. But for those listening and you're not in the UK has a weird system of using imperial and metric, and it's very confusing. Like we calculate in miles, but we also calculate in meters. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, mate. It's confusing.
We just make our life harder. That's all we do. We just make our life harder. And going back to kind of not too much into the percentage side of it, but numbers side of it. If you were calculating, so you get your protein. We're saying protein is normally about kind of 25% of our diet to 20% of our diet, using that model.
Yeah.
Carbs or fats are negotiable. You can decide which one is going to be your proprietary source of energy. A lot of endurance athletes tend to go more down the fat line rather than the carb line these days. So if you're doing like long distance marathons, people will, like Nick did with like long cycling, you'd try and use your fat system a little bit more because it takes longer to break down than the other areas as well. So when we're looking at that, we kind of say 25%, then I'd argue probably like 35% maybe into your fats or carbs, and then the rest of it's going to be made up in...
One thing to mention with that before we move on from there is that fat is essential for the body, and you need a minimum amount. You cannot say that you want all your calories from carbs and protein and have no fat, because you will die eventually. All right, you do need fat. Carbs, on the other hand, you can reduce to zero, and in theory you can survive, but that's not saying that you have to cut it down either. The main thing is you get your protein, you have a certain amount of fat, and then you can decide if you want more calories from carbs or fats based on your goals. Yeah.
Now, calculating all that and getting that all into a position where someone can feel comfortable with knowing where they're at, because tracking is such a big and useful tool. It is just a tool. It's a tool to have in your toolbox. I think a lot of people are scared about using it, worried about becoming obsessive. You need to test it out before you start to label saying, I'm going to be obsessed with things. Just one thing I want to put out there. Because it's one of the most powerful tools out there. All the people you see who make amazing progress online, I guarantee have tracked their food at least once to know where they are. To give, like me and Nick don't track very often, but that's because we have the awareness of what we're eating. We understand that if I eat XYZ food throughout the day, this equals this amount of calories. If I take one thing out, it reduces it by this. I'm now in a deficit. But that's from years and years and years of practice, which eventually means you're tracking free, essentially. So if we're calculating it, I'd really advise using any kind of calorie calculator online. Caloriecalculator.net, a lot of PTs won't tell you about, because they basically a lot of people like to glorify it and put their own out there. It's the same thing for every single calculator you use. Just use one to find what your maintenance calories are. Then when we're talking about surpluses and deficits, a surplus is going to be anything over that maintenance, and a deficit is going to be anything under that maintenance. You're only ever going to be in a deficit if you're looking to drop body fat or drop weight. And then you're going to be over that if you want to be in a surplus, gaining lean muscle mass or gaining weight. Okay, that's kind of like the two ways we look at it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That is literally the best website, calculator.net. Like we could plug our own thing, obviously, and say, guys, if you want to have this measured for you, you can just DM us and we will do the work for you. We'll even give you access to the Coaching Lab app if you become a client, and also get access to it. Lost you there for a second, Dan. But yeah, obviously, if we're looking for something that's free, you don't need to get in contact with us about, you can go on calculator.net and that will give you your calories. It doesn't give you macros, does it?
No, it doesn't. It does just give you, yeah.
But obviously, calories is the first thing you would track anyway. So you track your calorie intake first in terms of knowing what you need to get in. And then obviously with macros, so we're going to say 25% protein, yeah? Mm-hmm. Down the middle, bosh, 25%. Now, minimum fats, as we said earlier, 30%, 35% would be really effective. Now, when we say fats, that is a whole umbrella term for any type of fat. Yeah? Dan, we're losing you, man. Losing Dan. Here he is. He's back.
It's going mad. It's sorted now. There was just a little bit of a wire. I'm all good. I'm here.
So protein 25%, fats 30% minimum. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 35% roughly on average if you can. And then carbs.
Apologies for interrupting the podcast. We know you're getting fully engrossed into this episode, and we really appreciate you stopping on the video on YouTube or on Spotify if you found us through one of the search pages. Make sure to leave a review and a subscription if you haven't already. But we just wanted to interject a point here that me and Nick have 15 years of coaching experience between us, and it's only getting better as we've got better guests on the podcast. The only way we can do that, though, is with the growth of our program that we've just released. We've got a 12-month Performwell program, which has just dropped, and we'd love you guys to get involved in it. If you want to know more details, make sure to head to the description, as we've got our website in there, which can give you a full overlay of the program. We're looking to help career-driven professionals, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and anyone dominate their life by improving their lifestyle. Me and Nick like to claim ourselves as experts in this area, and if you want to check out some of our other transformations, I'm sure you do. We've got some amazing people who have performed so well off the back of this program. Have a cracking day, and we really appreciate your time. Let's get back to the podcast.
Let's just go down the middle. Let's say 35%. Let's do 35% carbs, 35% fats, and then you can add an extra 5% on carbs or fats based on what you like. So let's say 40% carbs. You know, Dan, what is your percentage, by the way?
My percentages, I haven't got it up at the minute, but I normally
What's your macros?
So my macros is normally 30% protein, then I go 35%. I normally go for fats, and then the rest of it is carbs.
That's awesome. I think I'm on 180 grams of protein. I'm on 400 grams of carbs, and then I think I'm on 80 grams of fat.
Yeah, roughly. I think I'm roughly about the same. I think my protein is slightly, I have like 2 to 5 for protein, just because I find that's really useful for me because I get hungry a lot throughout the day, so it really keeps me satiated. And then my carb is about like 380, and then fats are normally floating around the 120 mark. Like I don't have them ridiculously high because I find if I'm on a high fat diet, I tend to gain quite a lot of body fat quite quickly. It's just how my body responds, and this is something that you just need to do. You try things out. It may not be that, it may just be seasonal, but for me personally, it aligns everything a lot nicer, so it's less like stress down that line.
Well, interesting thing about fats, mate, you know, fats are utilized by the body, are normally stored as fat before anything else is, as a macronutrient. Doesn't mean it makes you fat, by the way, those listening. Doesn't make you fat. It just means it's the easiest macro for your body to transfer into fat. So obviously if you're in a calorie deficit, you'll still burn fat. But if you're in a calorie surplus, most of your fat stored will come from fat intake.
But it's then with the balance, it's making sure the balance of the two is correct. So like fat burning occurs throughout the day. And like right now, we're going to be burning fat over anything else, over the carbohydrates. So you have to factor in, even if you are consuming more fat, the likelihood is you probably burn a lot of fat throughout the day as well. And we're never going to know what that is unless you like literally attached yourself to a nice bit of experimental kit. To track
we're not trying to confuse you guys. At the end of the day, if you're in a calorie deficit, you'll lose fat. It's just that you need to understand, you know, these things because it will help you make decisions in the future. So yeah, that's it. Calculating macros. It's that easy, guys.
It is pretty really easy. Just don't confuse yourself with it. The thing is as well, and I want to give this little top tip for people. If you are using apps like MyFitnessPal, One of the biggest problems it has is it brings in, so if you've got active calories throughout the day, say you go for, I don't know, a 5K run and you burn 400 calories, MyFitnessPal, if it's connected to your health app, it will basically tell you that you have 500 calories extra to eat throughout the day. Never, if you are looking to lose weight, eat back your calories. That metric is very useful if you are a performance athlete. You need to eat back your calories if you're a performance athlete, unless you are looking to lose weight. Okay, because the whole point is we're in a deficit. If we eat back the calories, when our watches, our phones, or apps track our calorie expenditure, we're normally about 20 to 30% out from what it actually is. So please just bear that in mind, that it's not always going to be picture perfect every single time that we're doing it. Okay.
Yeah, mate, I agree. Now, obviously, just to finish off with this, obviously, we're going to talk about the benefits you'll see from hitting and tracking your macros. Now, obviously, tracking your macros is very effective. You do need to track your macros. And that means when you use something like MyFitnessPal or Coaching Lab app with our clients, then you'll have the access to be able to track your calorie intake, your macros, and see whether you're actually hitting them or not. Now, Dan, benefits, mate.
Well, benefits of tracking, it gives you a lot more. One, we get adherence. Adherence increases greatly when I've got clients tracking their calories. Because at the end of the day, if you can physically see what you're eating, your awareness increases and you know kind of where you are. A lot of people are like, oh, I know what I'm eating. Track it for a day. Because I guarantee you're either under-reporting or you're over-reporting by about 20%. So track the calories to give you more awareness about the food you're eating. Also, a key thing with tracking is breaking down the micronutrients you're having. There's a large percentage of people that are deficient in fiber and struggle with, irritable bowel syndrome, different stuff like that. And I think it's really important that you look at your micronutrients too. Same thing with your vitamins, like your B12, your vitamin D, especially this time of year when it gets darker. So they're different metrics why tracking is so important. So you've got adherence, that's the main one. Adherence, awareness, and I'd also have acceptance as well. I think you could probably AAA it there, where there's a level of acceptance with the food that you're eating that helps you understand your diet better to make more educated choices when you're out and about. When I'm tracking my food, I feel very well educated throughout the week, and I don't just have something for the sake of it. You understand that the goal is there for a reason.
Now, there's one thing that we didn't mention when it comes to macros, and this is not to confuse you guys. Obviously, the calculations stay the same. There are different types of fats. There are different types of carbs. There are different types of proteins that we can eat. When it comes to fats, obviously, if your diet is consisting of one type of fat primarily, let's say, for example, saturated fat. If 100% of your fat intake is saturated fat and you're not getting any monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, you're not going to be in a healthy place later on. We do need to take into account there are different types.
You do get that from as well. To give some people some examples of what these are, because I think if we throw words out there, some people won't know exactly what these are. So we're talking, if it's monounsaturated, you're talking your olive oils, your avocados, your pine nuts, fantastic sources of monounsaturated. Polyunsaturated comes from, off the top of my head, it's not. No,
I don't know.
Let me go trans. Let me reverse that. Trans.
Wait, you're going to go trans?
I'm not going to go trans. But let me reverse that.
What's your pronouns?
Trans fat, protein. So trans fats is going to be stuff like your heavily processed foods. So it's going to be like your seed oils, your, for example, McDonald's, whatever they're cooked in. That kind of stuff is your trans fat. So they're the two areas, you want to monitor. And you're going to have different types of fats, but always monounsaturated is the best way to go for it.
Yeah, and before you can even think about that, guys, you've got to get your macros in check. That's the main thing. Honestly, listen to one of our other podcasts in regards to fats, carbs, and proteins. I promise you'll learn a lot more on those. But this one is all about just making sure you're hitting your macros, you know what you're supposed to be hitting, and showing how easy it is, because a lot of you don't even do that.
Well, actually, I'm going to come in now because I've just had a little Google, so you guys have the information for it as well. So in terms of polyunsaturated fats, we're talking omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. You can get them found in oils and soybean oil. So you can find those again. You'll find a combination of these in like your salmons, your oily fish, that kind of array of things. And saying they're going to come from your avocados and pine nuts too. So poly and monounsaturated come from similar things. It was just I had a bit of a brain fog.
And don't even get me started on omega-3 and omega-6 balance.
Go on then.
Don't even get me started on it. Like, guys, I'm not even gonna say it because you guys are gonna be like, damn, there's another problem. But omega-3, omega-6, there is a balance to them as well. Yeah. Primarily, if you're eating a balanced diet when it comes to your fat intake and taking it from the source we just said, then you shouldn't have any of these problems. One of the biggest problems we've experienced with the carnivore diet is a lot of people are eating a lot of saturated fat. And the studies have suggested that too much saturated fat can be, potentially bad for our hearts. Now, there is conflicting information that says the opposite as well. And there's a lot of experience from these carnivore dieters that say saturated fat has not had no problem on them and the health markers are better. So which one is correct? Obviously, it's hard to pinpoint that in the next couple of minutes that we have left, but have some variety in your diet, at least. If you are a carnivore dieter or you are a vegan, then obviously you're going to have your preferences in terms of what fat intake you have. Just make sure that you're not prioritizing one over everything else. Make sure there's a balance, is all we're saying.
Agreed. All right, guys. Well, thank you ever so much for watching this podcast. We appreciate you jumping in. If you've got any ideas for podcast episodes you want us to cover, or any questions that you want us to go over, please just drop them in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like, give us a follow, drop us a subscribe. Really helps grow the podcast, gets it out to more people, and we can help as many people as possible. We've got big aspirations, as always, with this podcast, and we'll catch you guys later.
Ciao, ciao.